All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Postgraduate Academy session today. We'll be speaking about how to cope within your funding landscape. I'll be doing most of the talking, but these are interactive sessions, and I really appreciate interaction from the community online right now and comments on the UKZN YouTube website as well. The session is meant to be very, very interactive, so please feel free to pop any questions or comments within the chat box. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, share your thoughts. You're also very welcome to switch your cameras on and make me feel like I'm not alone within this room. But in the interest of time, let us get started on this particular session on coping within your funding landscape. Now, this session integrates with many of the resources on grant writing and grants management that's hosted by the university and also affiliated research institutions, including within the Postgraduate Academy. So while I touch on some of those within the session today, we'll also deal on something that's almost inevitable for every academic, for every researcher that you ever meet, and likely also including yourself. And this is the fact that not every funding application is successful. And this rejection becomes a reality for all of us. As an independent researcher, and I mean, that's my assumption here within this community, and many of us are academics and many of us are studying to become academics or to become independent researchers, and we'll need to be able to find funding to support ourselves and to support our research. And because of that, you'll need to become very comfortable sourcing funds and consistently sourcing funds in order to do what you wanted to do within the research space in the first place. Right. Okay, so just as a reminder about why the sourcing of funds is so important. Why? Because money matters. We need this funding to grow our labs, to buy software, buy machines, build infrastructure, find an answer to your research question, learn a new technique, build research capacity, publish a paper, travel to conferences, employ staff, support staff, etc., etc., etc. We need money in order to do that. And you need to be able to build a track record of activity that brings in more money to keep doing what we want to do. And we want to continue doing what we want to do. We value this freedom, and we will persevere. We have to persevere through all sorts of rejection letters and applying again and growing all the time and getting better at applying for funding and ultimately succeeding more often than we did in the beginning. There's a lot of no's, but eventually they'll become more yeses. So I'd like to share with you a little bit quickly some very eye-opening advice that I received from a very prominent researcher recently. And what he said, it shook me. I never viewed myself or my research in this way. And since that awakening, I've changed quite a bit. So I'm hoping to share that with you a little bit today. What he said changed how I viewed my research journey. He said that your research persona is a brand. You basically represent a small business. And surviving in research is all about value, as it is in a business. So this really disturbed me because I have zero business mind, but I can understand, that the concept of value. And it took a while to to work through this concept. He says, just like in a business, money must come in. And for us, it would be in the form of grants or contracts or scholarships or awards, etc. You're bringing in value in the form of money. Ugh. And then, of course, you'd need to have an output. And for us, within our space, this output is research products. Research products must go out based on this money. And this would be papers and presentations and patents. And in this way, we form our impact. And another way to look at this is that this money investment brings value in terms of the reputation that you're growing for yourself. And the better your reputation, the easier it is for you to get money. And the more money you get, the more you can pump it in to whatever processes are put in place for you to generate data and have the impact that you wanted to have as a researcher. And from there, additional things start happening. You start growing within your academic space, promotions. You get involved in other activities like teaching or committees or boards. And this also builds on your reputation and your ability to get more investment into what you can do and what your science can do. It's unfortunate that funding plays such a central role in this process. But in my experience, it does. And I will challenge any researcher who tells you that it does not. I don't see anybody putting their hands up about that, so I'm not ready to challenge anyone now. But, we call me on it later. As a researcher, in whatever stage we are, we're going to be applying for funding. And every academic will experience rejection in some form of the applications, even the most seasoned researchers. And why? Why is this? Because there's a limited pot of research funds worldwide. And this means that competition is incredibly fierce, usually wherever you go. And whether you have a good idea, the best idea on the face of the planet, this itself is no guarantee of success for that grant application that you're writing. So it's very likely that you will experience rejection. I'm sorry to say it, but it is a reality. Be prepared for it. It's going to come, but it's not okay for you to just cut and run at the first no, to just check out and start crying and label yourself a complete failure and you're never going to try this again. Don't do it. I've done that. Please don't. Keep going. Keep an eye on that prize of freedom in your research, freedom to be able to make the impact that you want to make. Don't forget that. So you will need to learn how to use rejection as a tool for growth. Learn how to adopt a growth mindset. And lucky for you, Lou and Moodley discussed these concepts in last week's session in the Postgraduate Academy. If you haven't seen it, please check it out on the UKZN YouTube website. The concepts involved in adopting a growth mentality are absolutely relevant within this context of grant writing and dealing with the rejection. There's an opportunity within this rejection. So today I'm going to give you a taste of this growth in terms of perseverance in your grant funding activities. Okay, so why listen to me, little old me, speaking about your funding journey? Why? Because I've had about 23 years of experience of winning and losing out on grants. I guess it kind of started in high school. In high school, I had no idea what it was good at. I had some idea of what I was good at. I knew what I didn't like, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I applied to university based on my high school strengths. Wrote to various funding bodies like the National Research Foundation, Medical Research Council, the university itself. Said, these are my scores. This is what I'm interested in. Please give me money. I need to study. I'd like to make something of myself. And they said yes. Most of them said yes, which was great. Some of them said no, and I had to deal with the rejection then. But it didn't matter because there was some money coming in and I could go to university. Fantastic. So that was in undergrad. Postgrad, these types of grants were stipend-related grants, similar to an undergrad, money to be able to support yourself while you're studying. But during my postgrad, as you are, you're generating data, and you can use that data to apply for travel bursaries, which I did. Travel to attend conferences to share my data with the scientific community. And I applied for fellowships to learn a new technique in order to improve my research. Yeses and nos, but I earned the prize. The want, the need to grow. And then very similar trends within postdoc, research associates. My life as an independent scientist, it's largely the same. But the focus becomes more on finding funding to support a program of research and not just your own stipend and your own technical development. So for those beginning a journey to becoming an academic or a successful independent researcher, sourcing funds is central in this process. And this goes hand in hand with funders saying, no, sorry, we won't be investing in this proposal right now. And we'll just need to have to learn how to deal with that. And I'm going to get to it, I promise. So I'm aware that within this particular session, that we have a very diverse community of participants with many different backgrounds and a varying degree of exposure to sourcing research funds. But I'd like for everyone to get the most out of this session. So here are a few tasks that I'd like for you to do, or even keep at the back of your mind while we're going through the rest of the content. So to those of you who are new to writing grants, actually, I'm very curious, who's never written a grant, asked an institution for funding? Please let me know in the chat box or raise your hand somehow on Zoom. Let me know if you have not. Fantastic. Okay, I see some people who have been exposed to grant writing. So for those of you who are new to writing grants, please just take a moment to acknowledge the benefits in these discussions. I mean, eventually you would need to be writing grants, and learning from people who have had grant experience, you would be able to relate these lessons within this community to your future grant writing applications. So it's useful for you in that way. So please don't disappear. To those of you who have some grant writing experience, it's also quite useful to reflect on the feedback from people who have already experienced funding rejections before. It's useful to hear how other people learned to cope if you are having a bit of an issue working through the no's that tend to come often. Sorry. And here are additional questions that perhaps we could touch on either in the chat box or if anybody would like to speak about them right now. Has your application for funding ever been rejected? How did you feel? How did you feel on the day when you got that message saying, no, sorry? And then a week later, after you have a chance to think about it, how did you feel then? What did you do when your application was successful? I've got many, many stories because I've had many no's, and I'm happy to share that with you now. And I do want to note that one of the big problems with researchers is that we don't like to talk about rejection. And I think it's because it seems as a failure we're not good enough, our research is not good enough, our ideas are not good enough, the team we're working with is not good enough, and not as an opportunity to grow, which is ridiculous. I challenge you within this community and online too, to speak about your experiences. Yeah, if anybody would like to say anything, please do raise your hand. It may help someone who's struggling with rejection, or at the very least, there's comfort in knowing that you are not alone. So I'm going to give us a minute or so. If anybody would like to say anything, please do put it in the chat box or raise your hand. I'm going to take a breath, have a sip of my coffee. Did everybody get their money? What? No one has had a rejection from a funder before. Let me tell you what happened to me once. So I got a no, and I went into this crazy spiral of negative behaviors that will absolutely just badly affect my health. And it took me about a week or so to realize that this is not good for me. And I started speaking to my colleagues who'd had similar experiences, and we worked through it together. There's, you know, that saying, misery loves company. Knowing that other people have gone through the same sort of horror story that you had, and working together as a community to what's the word? To improve yourself, to understand what went wrong and how you can fix it and grow from it. That is the best thing that I could have done in that particular instance. So there is a note from someone within the chat box. I'm going to read it now. They say, I was devastated as I felt that I had out of my best foot, that I put my best foot forward. I felt like giving up, but I talked to my supervisor and mentor, and was encouraged to hear that they too had been rejected a few times. It is encouraging, isn't it? This kind of reassured me, but I still felt sad from time to time. And let me tell you, it doesn't go away. Another message says, I made a mistake. I have never applied for a grant. Wow, there's a first time for everything. I challenge you to do so. I mean, you know, yes. Even if it means that there might be a no, the benefit for you and your career and for the people that you can help with your research is, it far outweighs that. So please do give it a go. So for me, I think that perseverance is it lies in this true understanding of why we are here, where we are going, why it's important that I get to this place that I want to go. I have a goal. I'm a researcher. I want to solve the world's STI problem, and I'm not going to stop until I get there. I'm going to build myself a team who want the same goal, want to reach the same goal, and together we are going to find financial support to solve these problems. So it lies in this introspection, this understanding of why you are here, why you are doing what you are doing, why you are becoming a researcher. Is it to become rich and famous? Is it to answer interesting questions, or to help humanity, or save the world? Whatever it is, whatever your passion is, that will sustain you through these down days of uncertainty, and it will also help you rise and see the opportunities in any no that you might get along the way, just as Luan mentioned in the session last week. So I want to explain, give a personal note on this, lessons that I learned from the global pandemic. So my background is in HIV prevention research. And then COVID came, and suddenly the funding landscape was directed more towards COVID than HIV. Not that the problem of HIV had disappeared, but that there were I guess what could have been considered at the time way more pressing matters. For example, keeping people who are dying right now alive. Granted, I'm very important, and that just meant that my research was delayed for a little bit. But during this period, I did still apply for research grants. I think 7 within 2020, and I did not get a single yes. And that's a reality for the funding climate. I mean, this had less to do with me and my abilities and more to do what was available at the time for teams well equipped to answer specific COVID-related questions to keep people alive. And this experience within this global pandemic taught me a few things about how to run my business in order to still keep going during these bleak times, and I'll call them bleak for me. So our lesson number 1 is for us to, as researchers, to work towards building a more diversified portfolio of activities. And this means that we should be aiming for different streams of funding, not just focusing all our attention on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all our attention on the NIH, because something might happen and their focus would be turned into another direction and you're left without funding. So diversify your funders, diversify what it is that you're doing as well, and work with various groups of people from various sectors. But I cannot stress this enough. This is something that will absolutely count in your favor and help to ensure that you have a more consistent source of funding. And it's probably, in my opinion, the best way to cope with every funding landscape, to be resilient in the face of changing funding environments. So, for example, if you're an immunologist like I am, don't just focus on immune responses to one disease. If you're a social scientist, don't just focus on one aspect of societal research. I mean, you have skills that are transferable in multidisciplinary ways. You could work with researchers from other fields to solve related questions. And these will be funded through different sources of funding, not your usual sources, and for different lengths of time that might just overlap and cover that gap that you don't have funding from your normal funding sources. So diversifying your portfolio of activities is so important. I cannot stress that enough. If your application is rejected, split up your application and target it to different organizations, whether it be government or industry. And the reason for this, for me, is that you don't have to start from scratch every time. You already have this little template, this network this collection of data that can be edited nicely and directed into the language appropriate for a particular funder in government or a different funder in industry. The idea is the same, but how you write it would be different. So split it up, spread it around. And timing is also important. You can work on other applications, on other ideas, while you're still waiting for the outcome of applications that you have already submitted. So you're always doing this sourcing, you're always selling. For those who have experienced rejection, it's useful to become part of reviewer panels. It gives you an inside scope to why applications get rejected in the first place, and you get a better understanding, a better grasp of it. So for me, what I experienced while reviewing grant applications for the NRF, for the NIH, here are a list of common rejections, common reasons for rejection that we came across. So off the bat, for some of them, the application didn't meet the eligibility criteria. The grant was asking that the grant proposal, what do you call it? The call for funding was asking for something specific. The application came from left field, it was not responsive to what the grant wanted. Or they asked for people from a particular region or from a particular institute or collaboration between certain research institutes, but that did not occur. So off the bat, sorry, you don't apply. I mean, it had nothing to do with the research. It's just that the eligibility criteria were not met. Application didn't meet the funding guidelines, as I just mentioned, or the committee thought the research question wasn't sufficiently important or relevant. The committee didn't see how the project would answer the question. There was a lack of expertise, particularly in my case, technical expertise. They couldn't see how the project could actually happen based on the expertise and the infrastructure available. The team involved didn't make sense. There was a lack of clarity in the grant application to begin with. I'm giving you these notes here as a blueprint for yourself. So if you're busy writing a grant, try to avoid all of these little points that I've noted over here. Ensure that you have a record of developing the techniques required, or seek collaborators who already have that research, that technique established. If you don't, so at least you've got exposure to it or access to it. Ask questions like, is your project actually needed? How do you know? If you don't know, how are you going to communicate it properly to somebody who's reviewing your document? Anyway, I've got a lot to say about this. These are the key points as common reasons, in my experience, for rejecting an application. So, as somebody who's had applications rejected, there are a few ways to recover from it. One, as someone in the chat already says, this realizing that you are not alone is actually quite comforting. Oops, sorry. It's painful, I think, when your grant application is rejected. But there are further thoughts that you can have to help you to still be productive after you've recovered from your disappointment. And I think first and foremost is this thought of you are not alone. The average success rate of getting a grant is about 20, I guess it depends on where you are. My experience is about 20 to 30% as an experienced researcher. And, rejection it doesn't always mean that your work is flawed. Every academic will have more rejections than successes in their career. It's just how it is. Don't take it personally. And that's the first thing that we tend to do, right? Oh, they hate me. Oh, they hate my research. And not how can I improve? How can we as a team make this better? There's a problem we'd like to solve. How do we get there? How do I rewrite this application so that I could be successful? I know it's difficult. And it does take a lot of time to master, but don't stop trying. The next is to give yourself some time. Allow yourself, that's why I asked this question earlier on about how did you feel a day or a week later. There's benefit in giving yourself some time. Allow yourself a day to a week or so to recover, take deep breaths, take long walks, pet your animals, speak to your family, speak to your friends, de-stress, debrief somehow. When people are turned down, when people are rejected, we get angry, we get upset. Can't help it. We go through various stages of emotions, the anger, the disappointment, the denial, the despair, the grieving. You put a lot of time into writing these applications, and someone says no, and then you just get deflated and angry. But give it some time. Let it play out. experience those emotions. I mean, these are real, these are true feelings that you're having. It might not be best for you to put pen to paper immediately. Give it some time, think about it. There might be some gems, and usually there are, in the reviewer's comments. I'll speak about that in a little bit. Clear your mind and come back to the application, prepared to view it with a constructive eye. Share your setback. Oh, I told you, scientists, researchers, we hate sharing what we view as failure, but we need to get over ourselves. Discussing the grant rejection with colleagues or mentors or supervisors, as somebody said, can actually provide this emotional support that we need to recover short term, and also the constructive feedback that we need to reapply for the grant when we're ready. It's important. Our peers, our colleagues, our mentors, our friends, they can help us to put this rejection into context, and that's very important. They might know of other funders who are better suited to this idea, or a different team that you might want to try working with different expertise who might be able to help you solve the problem in a different way. It's useful to expose yourself to various groups of people while sharing this little setback. And I mean, again, people whose grants have been rejected, we tend to not want to share, but it's in our best interest to suck it up and just speak. And I think one of the most important ways to recover is to view this from this growth mindset concept. Look for ways to improve. Tackle the concerns that the reviewers rejected your grant. And the way to do that is to look at the feedback. Sometimes grants don't actually give you feedback, and in that case, you can actually ask them. So this is information from Candice Hassel, who's the head of research affairs at Wellcome Trust. She says, if you didn't get feedback or reviewer comments or a review feedback or reviewer comments from a funder, just ask. A funding agency won't think bad of anybody who's contacting them for advice, even if they can't give it. Because seeking advice is the first step in starting a dialogue and building a relationship with a potential long-term funder. When you, just like when you're exposed to a supervisor or a lecturer within a class, a lecture setting, when you ask a question, they know you, they recognize you, right? It's the same with your funders. You're starting to have that sort of discussion. You're starting to get to know each other. And that's useful, having that sort of relationship. If you get feedback, it might still be a good idea to engage with this program officer for the grant, especially if you require clarity. And that's the important bit about this relationship. The feedback that these people can give you can be useful. You might be able to get a better sense from them about why the grant really wasn't, or rather, how you might be able to improve the writing, the content, the approach within your grant application. So, what did I say? You get your feedback from the reviewer. Look at what they are saying. What are the strengths of the arguments in the feedback? What are the weaknesses? Look at the competition. Who else is getting grants for the same sort of concepts that you're presenting? There's actually a website that checks up on that. I didn't know it, grantome.com. It is quite worthwhile. Once you get your reviewer feedback, you can appraise the merit in what they are saying and then reformat your application accordingly. And then get more feedback. So when addressing these comments, don't just assume that by addressing the comments, doing exactly what the reviewer says, you're actually going to make it better and that you'll be successful the next time. That's not always the case. And it's unlikely that when you resubmit an application that you're going to get the same reviewers. And you're going to need to reformat it. So it's like a new, wholesome, strong, holistic, complete application for the next round. And this might involve incorporating new ideas, new tech, new collaborations, based on what your researcher, your reviewer said, or not. It might include information, suggestions from your colleagues, your mentors, your peers who also looked at your reviewer comments after you shared your setback with them in the first place. It's worthwhile to circulate your revisions to other scientists or people within your field just to see how it reads again. Feedback is important. And then assess your grant writing strategy. I'm going to spend a couple more minutes on this. There have been a couple of sessions on grant writing within the university, within research institutions. So I doubt that there's anybody within this forum who has not experienced the grant writing workshop. If you haven't, there are some wonderful ones on campus. So I'm just going to summarize what I think are key points within the grant writing strategy that you'd need to consider when writing your grants. Time, number one. Planning your grant writing period is very important because we often tend to rush through our grants. Now, writing becomes really haphazard towards the end because you're pushing towards a deadline and you're writing rubbish. So ask yourself questions when you're reviewing your rejected grant. Did you run out of time and end up planning it in a rush? Did you have to rewrite after discovering details about the call specification that you missed the first time? So did you read incorrectly to begin with? Did you get sufficient input from your senior colleagues, your mentors, your supervisor, or not allow colleagues enough time to give you that feedback before you submitted the document? Did you take full advantage of the support that's available within your institution? Good questions to ask yourself. So some strategies going forward while you're busy writing your grant is to set a timeline and stick to it. And this includes reviewing the grant application and documents that are required, and setting your timelines based on that. It will take me 5 days to complete this section that they want. I need to dedicate a certain amount of time to get this letter from some collaborator because they always take long. You know, that sort of thing needs to be factored in your timeline, and try your best to stick to it. Review the funder's previous successful grants, and this is useful as it serves as a benchmark. You know the quality of applications that make it, the content, and you can mirror and improve on that for yours. Be responsive to the application. If they want X, give them X. Give them X and Y even. Just make sure that your bottom line is covered there. And have your application reviewed by other people, someone who's not involved even. That's useful, because what happens in a reviewing committee is you'd find that people who are not too familiar with your work would be, or with your work or even your field, would be in the reviewer committee. And you need to convince this person who doesn't know as much as what you do about a certain research field that you know what you're talking about, that this idea is fantastic, that you are the right person, you have a good team, you have a wonderful institution, and the content is feasible. You can make a difference. So those are the things that you would need to keep in mind while you're busy drafting your grant writing strategy. Additional questions. There's more questions to ask yourself. Will the project contribute to answering a question that the funder has defined as important? So that speaks to being responsive to the funding application. Did your application address the priorities of the call specifically enough? Is what you plan to do completely clear? That's very useful information, especially if you have a reviewer who doesn't know much about your field. You'd need to be able to still communicate effectively with that person and with clarity so that they can understand what you're doing and know why it is important, and also that you are the best person for the job. Is it clear what will be discovered by each phase of the project? Is there novelty in your proposed idea? Funders are not going to give money to something that is not new, or does not have an impact that has not been seen before, or at least not often. Did you clearly and completely answer the questions in every section of the application form? Because if you didn't, I mean, people are going to question whether you can actually pull off the work that you said you're going to do if you can't even, fill in an application correctly. So try to be meticulous when you're filling out your grant as well. It's useful addition to your grant writing strategy. Something I didn't mention, is there rigor in your approach? Are you planning for potential failures or unexpected outcomes? What are your backup plans if something happens? Have you factored load shedding in, for example? How are you going to accommodate that? How will you know whether you have made a difference? What are your plans for evaluating the outcome of your project? That's nice. So a good way to start or restart your writing to improve your chances of success, is to ensure that you are aware of how the application will be marked. And this information is usually freely given. It's, for example, anybody who's funded by the NRF, you can go to the NRF website. They have a clearly outlined reviewing criteria document. So you have a blueprint, you know what the reviewers are looking for, right? So you can be responsive to those. Let's say they're going to be reviewing your significance, the benefit of your project to public health. You need to be sure that you articulate clearly the significance of your project. Your team, the investigators involved, you need to ensure that you articulate the benefits, the strengths of your investigators clearly. Innovation in approach, those are things that funders generally do assess when reviewing the documents. So let me just go through them briefly in this forum. So when I mention significance, I know for the NIH, they specifically look at whether the project is feasible. So if all the specific aims are achieved, what would the project contribute to this field? How is it going to help? How significant or important is this contribution? Have you presented some sound scientific knowledge or concepts? Is the importance of the proposed, what is the importance of the proposed work in the field? Is this worth doing? Is the benefit enough? The investigators, they would want to know whether the investigative team has the collective experience to lead the project and do the work and interpret the results. In my experience, I generally forget to interpret the results, but then I keep needing to remind myself to do that, because that's an important aspect of your application. Is there evidence of appropriate expertise within the team? If there isn't, or do they have infrastructure or access to collaborators who can fill that gap? Is there evidence of potential for successful project management and the execution of the project? Will it be managed well? It speaks to feasibility as well. Innovation, is there novelty in this project Does the application challenge or does it seek to shift the current research or clinical practice paradigms, or novel concepts or approaches or novel methods or novel instrumentations or interventions employed? And this is useful to assess the level of out-of-the-box thinking, or at least the reviewers use this to assess the out-of-the-box thinking. That's useful for making such substantial changes in the way we do things. And lastly, people look at the approach. What is the strategy like? What are the methods like? What sort of analyses are going to be included here? Are they well-reasoned? Is it appropriate to accomplish the aims that the team has put forward? Is the rationale sound? Is the study design good? Have they worked through their strengths and their weaknesses? Are they aware of that? What are the fallback plans? Are the results going to be unbiased? Are they meaningful, interpretable? Are the statistics employed correct, etc.? So those are four main categories of reviewing criteria that are very commonly employed when assessing whether a grant is going to be funded or not. So in these last minutes, I just want to summarize the key elements of the session. Key points about the rejection recovery. Firstly, rejection happens. Don't be an ostrich and put your head in the sand and be like, no, it's never going to happen to me. It probably will happen to you, and you need to just be aware that these things do happen, and it's definitely in your best interest to recover appropriately and continue. Apply again. Focus on the goal of your research and developmental goals. And to do that, remember, you are not alone. Others have experienced rejection. They got through it. You can learn from those as well. Give yourself some time. Share. This is within our community. I mean, if you don't have anyone else to share with, you can send me an email. I'm happy to work through rejections. I've had loads of experience with rejections. And look for ways to improve. Just a reminder that, you know, a good grounding is in your passion. That is something that is going to sustain you through any no that you experience down the line. And I just want to end off on the grant writing tips that I presented. I'll put a YouTube link at the bottom over there. This is from a guy who has also had loads of experience in writing grants, and he speaks about writing and then rewriting, because that's how it goes, right? If your reviewers say no, it doesn't mean that you need to just stop right there, you know, drown yourself. Please don't. Take a look at your grant, re-look at it, rewrite it after speaking with people or analyzing the merit in your reviewer comments. So he says, ensure that there's alignment of the project and the funder's scopes. So like I said, be responsive to the funder and the proposal, get an idea of how the proposal will be marked. And in that way, you can reverse engineer success. I love that. Use it as a benchmark and reverse engineer success. Ensure that you have the appropriate eligibility criteria. You don't want to be, you know, scratched off before anybody even reads your grant properly. Ensure that you have an appropriate track record. If you don't, try working with people who do. I mean, that's how you grow yourself. Ensure a value-added team and sufficient time to complete your application. Ensure that your grant is structured logically and succinctly. This is a very good advice. think like a tired reviewer. If you're reviewing somebody's document and you're just so tired and you've been reading 10 million other documents as a funding application reviewer, the best document to land on your desk would be the one that highlights very clearly the things that you are looking for. These are the points of significance. Is it valid? Yes, fantastic. I love this application. So just try to make sure that your structure is logical and that you draw the reviewer's eyes to the points that he or she, that they would need to, focus on in the review. That's you reverse engineering your success. Ensure that the grant is formatted correctly to avoid submission errors. This is actually a very tricky, it's weird. So for example, the NIH would want your grant to be submitted in letter format. And if you submit it in A4 format, they'll send it back to you and say it's not submitted correctly. And that takes time and it annoys people. So try to get it done right. Excuse me. It shows that you are meticulous, and if you do well in writing your grant, you will do well, presumably, in completing the project as you have proposed it. And the last very important grant writing tip is to get feedback. Your feedback that you get helps you to improve the reiterations, the next versions of your grant. Excuse me. And I think that is all that I wanted to say about grant writing, about all our rejection experiences. And I hope that I've at least convinced one person in this group to apply and others to reapply, to keep it going. There's benefit in building our brand and applying for funding to get what we want to have done in the first place done, to meet our goals, to see our passions realized. And unfortunately, it takes money. We need it, and we need to be able to know how to sell ourselves well. So writing grants and getting the experience in doing that and even reviewing grants will help you to write better. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the content? Coping in this funding landscape. You're welcome for the content. Could I ask, is there anybody how did you feel, if there is anyone here, who had a successful application? Who's had more successful applications than rejections? Please don't tell me I'm the only one. Wow. I think last week's session on adopting a growth mindset, it goes it's hand in hand with this session on coping in the funding landscape. Because when you get a no, when you see this negativity or experience the negativity, there's a lesson in that. It's don't give up. There's a positive, there's a way to improve. We can continue because we have a passion, we have an answer, a question that we want to answer, and we will grow through the feedback to do it. We had somebody saying that they had a successful, a successful application. You get very excited. Fantastic. And it's a start. I love that you say that getting that grant is a start. It's a springboard, because now with this money, you saw that feedback loop in the beginning, you'd be able to start building yourself, building your brand, answering your questions, building this track record of a good reputation within your field, building a track record of impact. And with that, you can get more money to do even more. It's wonderful. Congratulations on your grant. I hope for you many more successes than the sadness involved in the failure. But don't forget that there are lessons when with the rejection. Right. Well, I hope this was a very helpful, useful session. Good luck to everybody for all your grant writing endeavors. I hope that you realize the impact that you want to have. And don't feel disheartened. If you want to, you can send me an email. That's fine. I'm happy to share any rejection grabs, and we can work through finding positive together if you'd like. Okay, so on that note, positive note, I'm going to close the session, and next week we'll have the Student Support Services team back again with us. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.